It started off as a perfect Saturday afternoon. The sun was shining, the smell of grilled burgers filled the air, and my backyard was full of laughing friends and neighbors, all enjoying the kind of relaxed, easygoing get-together that should have been completely harmless. I had been planning this barbecue for weeks, sending out invitations, prepping the menu, even setting up extra tables and chairs. It wasn't anything massive, just a small neighborhood gathering of about 15 people, all of us looking forward to good food, cold drinks, and a little break from the usual routine. But, of course, Karen had other plans. For years, she had been the self-appointed enforcer of the HOA, lording over the neighborhood like some kind of dictator in a pantsuit. She had a rule for everything, and if something wasn't explicitly against the HOA regulations, she'd find a way to make it one. She lived in the biggest house on the block, and she carried herself like that meant she was entitled to control everything that happened in the community. I knew she was nosy. I knew she was controlling. But I didn't think for a second that she would lose her mind over a backyard barbecue. At first, I didn't even notice her watching. I was too busy flipping burgers, laughing at a joke Lisa made, and handing out cold beers to the neighbors who had just arrived. It wasn't until Jim nudged me, nodding toward the street, that I saw her standing there, arms crossed, face twisted in fury, watching like some kind of HOA gargoyle. I sighed. Here we go. Lisa smirked. How much do you want to bet she's about to throw a fit? Jim chuckled. I'm betting at least one fake violation notice by sundown. Karen stood there for a few more minutes, like she was working up the energy to storm over, and then sure enough, she marched straight into my backyard like she owned the place. What do you think you're doing? She snapped, her voice already at that ear-splitting pitch she always used when she was pretending to be in charge. I turned, flipping the last burger onto the serving tray, and gave her my best unbothered smile. Having a barbecue. Want a plate? Her eye twitched. You know the HOA bans BBQs. This is a direct violation. I could fine you for this. I sighed. No, Karen. The HOA bans open flame grills and shared spaces. This is my private backyard. That rule doesn't apply here. Her face twisted like she had just sucked on a lemon. It's still a nuisance. The smoke is spreading. You're disrupting the neighborhood ambience. Jim, ever the instigator, took an exaggerated sniff of the air and sighed happily. Smells amazing to me. You sure you don't want a burger? Karen's hands curled into fists. She was furious, but she didn't have an actual argument. She just stood there, fuming, her face turning an alarming shade of red. And then she did the unthinkable. Without another word, she stormed past me, grabbed my grill, my entire grill, and started dragging it toward the pool. At first, I was too stunned to react. My brain refused to process what was happening. Then Lisa shrieked, "She's actually doing it." And that was when it clicked. "Karen, stop," I yelled, lunging forward. But she was already at the edge of the pool, eyes wild with self-righteous fury. And then, with a scream of "barbecues are banned," she shoved the entire grill into the water. There was a loud splash, a hiss of steam, and then complete silence. Everyone just stood there, staring, watching the last few burgers and hot dogs bob to the surface, while the grill itself sank to the bottom of the pool. Then, as if the moment needed to be even more surreal, Karen turned to me, breathing heavily, looking absolutely deranged, and shrieked, "You will thank me for this one day." I stared at her. Are you insane? That was it. That was the moment. Someone, maybe Jim, maybe Lisa, maybe one of the neighbors who had been quietly filming the entire thing on their phone, burst into uncontrollable laughter. And then, the rest of the party joined in. Karen's face turned even redder, her eyes wild as she realized we weren't shocked or intimidated. We were laughing at her. And then, as if on cue, a voice rang out from behind us. "Ma'am, step away from the pool." We all turned, and there, standing at the entrance to my backyard, were two cops. Apparently, one of my neighbors, probably Jim, had called them the second Karen grabbed the grill. And now she was about to learn a very important lesson. I watched as her face went from red to pale, her whole body stiffening as the officers approached. "What seems to be the problem here?" one of them asked. I pointed to the smoking, sinking grill. "She threw my grill into the pool." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Is that true, ma'am?" Karen's mouth opened and closed, but she was completely speechless. For the first time in forever, she had no words. Then she did what Karen always did when she was losing. She tried to play the victim. I was just enforcing HOA rules. He was violating community standards. There was an open flame. I was protecting the neighborhood. The second cop folded his arms. By throwing a grill into a pool? That's destruction of property. Karen's eye twitched. Then the first officer pulled out a pair of handcuffs. And in the blink of an eye, Karen completely snapped. You can't do this to me. I am the HOA. I am the law. She didn't even get to finish the sentence before the officers grabbed her by the arms and tackled her to the ground. The entire party burst into cheers. And Karen went kicking and screaming, still shouting about your regulations as they dragged her out of my backyard. It was, hands down, the most satisfying thing I had ever seen. Jim clapped me on the back. Best barbecue ever. Lisa wiped away tears of laughter. I hope someone got that on video. Spoiler alert, they did. And when that footage hit social media, let's just say Karen was in for a whole new level of humiliation. And this was only the beginning of her downfall. Karen's arrest had given the entire neighborhood a sense of relief, but it was a temporary victory, one we all thought would be the end of her reign of terror. But Karen, despite her spectacular downfall, wasn't done with us yet. Less than 24 hours after being hauled away in handcuffs, she was back. Not back in the literal sense. The police had charged her with destruction of property, trespassing, and disorderly conduct, and she was waiting for her court date, but she had found a new way to make life miserable for all of us. She had lawyers. And suddenly, my mailbox was flooded with letters, legal notices, threats, demands for compensation. Not just me either. Jim, Lisa, half the neighborhood, we were all getting hit with paperwork, all stamped with the letterhead of a very expensive law firm. It turned out Karen wasn't just trying to get out of trouble. She was trying to flip the situation and make herself the victim. Her claims? Defamation. She insisted that the viral video of her getting arrested had ruined her reputation. Harassment. She accused me and my guests of ganging up on her and inciting violence. Property damage. She actually had the audacity to claim that her own actions, throwing my grill into the pool, somehow caused her emotional distress. It was absolute insanity. But the thing about rich, entitled people, they don't care if they're wrong. They just want to win. And Karen was throwing everything she had into making sure I paid for what she called my crimes against her. Lisa was livid. Are you kidding me? This woman should be in jail, not filing lawsuits. Jim shook his head, flipping through the paperwork. Man, she really thinks she can sue us for watching her commit a crime? That's a new level of delusion. But I wasn't worried. Karen had money, but I had something even better. The truth. And I wasn't about to back down. The neighborhood fights back. Karen thought she could bully her way out of this mess, throw enough legal threats at us that we just give up and let her win. What she didn't expect, that we'd fight back. The first thing I did, I called a lawyer, a good one. Someone who specialized in HOA disputes and civil lawsuits. His response after reading Karen's claims? This is nonsense. She's got nothing. That's all I needed to hear. And then something amazing happened. The entire neighborhood came together, Lisa, Jim, everyone who had ever been harassed by Karen, and we started to build a case against her. We compiled every fine she ever issued, every ridiculous HOA rule she enforced, every incident where she had overstepped her authority. We dug up old complaints, found people who had moved away because of her, even uncovered documents where she had misused HOA funds. In other words, we were about to bury her in evidence. And the best part, the viral video of her getting arrested had gained so much attention online that news outlets started picking up the story. Suddenly, it wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. It was a full-blown scandal. Karen's day in court. By the time Karen's court date arrived, she had no idea what was coming. She walked into that courtroom with confidence, dressed in her most expensive power suit, acting like she was about to win big. But the moment the evidence was presented, she fell apart. The video footage of her throwing the grill into the pool played on a big screen for the entire courtroom to see. The dozens of pages of complaints and grievances from residents handed over in neatly organized folders. The financial reports exposing how she had misused HOA funds submitted as official evidence. And suddenly, Karen's smug attitude vanished. She tried to deny everything, but the facts didn't lie. The judge didn't even hesitate before ruling against her. Her bogus lawsuit? Thrown out immediately. Her attempt to play the victim? Laughed out of the courtroom. Her own actions? Used against her in ways she never saw coming. But the best part? The judge wasn't done with her. Mrs. Karen, it is clear to this court that you have spent years abusing your position, terrorizing your neighbors, and engaging in gross misconduct. Your behavior is reprehensible, and you will be held accountable. And then came the sentencing. She was ordered to pay restitution, not just to me, but to everyone in the neighborhood she had wronged. She was banned from holding any HOA position ever again. And because of the financial fraud tied to her misuse of funds, she was now facing additional criminal charges. Her face? Pure horror. She had thought she was untouchable. Now she was watching her entire world crumble around her. And I just sat back and enjoyed the show. Karen's downfall should have been the final chapter, the end of an era, a lesson in karma finally catching up to the most entitled HOA tyrant the neighborhood had ever seen. But Karen was nothing if not persistent in her delusions, and even as the court rulings piled up, her bizarre and desperate attempts to claw her way out of the mess she had created only escalated further. At first, she tried to deny reality. After the court ruled against her and ordered her to pay restitution to multiple homeowners, she announced that she was appealing, as if she had even a chance of winning after the mountain of evidence stacked against her. Her lawyers, who had once been so cocky, were now visibly exhausted, clearly realizing they had attached themselves to a sinking ship. But Karen wasn't just fighting in court. She was fighting in the streets, too. No, literally, she was showing up in public places, corners of the neighborhood, to a meeting she was banned from attending, and shouting at anyone who would listen about how she was the real victim in all of this. She went full conspiracy mode, claiming that I had orchestrated everything, that the HOA board had been infiltrated by outside forces, and that she was going to take it all back. Her best plan yet. She tried to form a resistance movement. The Take Back Our HOA movement. One day, Lisa called me, laughing so hard she could barely get the words out. "You are not going to believe this," she gasped. I glanced at my phone. It was barely 9 a.m. Whatever it was bad news. What did she do this time? Lisa choked back laughter. She started a Facebook group. I frowned. For what? Lisa lost it again, practically wheezing. She's calling it Take Back Our HOA. I blinked. Take back? From who? From you, apparently. Lisa cackled. She sent me the link, and I immediately clicked on it, my curiosity outweighing my patience. And sure enough, there it was, a Facebook group started by Karen herself, complete with a grainy, slightly unhinged profile picture of her looking angry and determined in front of the HOA sign. And her first post? It was a manifesto. Attention, brave homeowners. It read like something out of a bad political thriller, complete with all caps declarations and multiple exclamation points. We must stand against this tyranny. The HOA has been corrupted by outsiders, led by a malicious individual who has destroyed our community. We will not be silenced. Join me in taking back what is ours. And the best part, she had 5 members, and 2 of them were bots. Lisa was howling with laughter. She really thinks she's about to stage a revolution, huh? I shook my head, still scrolling. I don't even have words. Oh, keep scrolling. It gets better. And then I saw her second post. It was a flyer. A printed, laminated flyer she had apparently been handing out around the neighborhood like some kind of unhinged political candidate. Protest against the tyrants. Join U.S. outside HOA headquarters this Saturday. Lisa was wheezing. Jim, who had just arrived and was reading over my shoulder, muttered, "She does realize the HO doesn't have a headquarters, right?" And yet, that Saturday, Karen actually showed up, armed with a homemade sign, a megaphone, and her 3 remaining supporters, all of whom looked like they had been tricked into attending. By that point, the rest of the neighborhood was just treating it like free entertainment. Someone brought popcorn. Lisa brought a folding chair. And we all watched in fascination as Karen, standing on the sidewalk in front of the neighborhood entrance, screamed into a megaphone about justice, while dozens of residents ignored her, walked past her, and openly laughed at her. And then, the cops showed up again. Because Karen had violated her court order by harassing HOA board members again. And this time, she wasn't just getting fined. She was getting arrested again. As they hauled her away, she screamed about corruption, betrayal, and something about the deep state, while Lisa whispered, "Best show ever." And that, I thought, was finally truly the end. The final humiliation. Karen's second arrest was the final straw. The neighborhood was done with her lawsuits were dead, and her Facebook revolution had collapsed faster than it started. And then, she got evicted. See, in her desperation to fight back, Karen had ignored one very important thing, her legal fees. She had hired expensive lawyers, spent a fortune on bogus lawsuits, and racked up so much debt and court costs that she fell behind on her mortgage. And the bank? The bank didn't care about her excuses. Within weeks, Karen's house went into foreclosure. And when the eviction notice arrived, she collapsed in the front yard, screaming. But no one felt bad for her. Because for years, she had made everyone's lives miserable. She had ruled the HOA like a dictator, tormented good people, and burned every bridge she had ever built. And now, she had nothing, not even a place to live. And then, in the greatest twist of all, I bought her house. Yep, I bought Karen's old house at auction. And when I moved in, I hosted the biggest backyard barbecue the neighborhood had ever seen, with smokers, grills, and fire pits all blazing. And the best part, I put up a giant sign in the front yard that read, "Welcome to Karen's former house, barbecue zone." And the neighborhood, they celebrated. Because after all these years, Karen was finally gone for good. It should have been over. Karen was gone, her house bought out, her reign of terror finally at an end. The neighborhood had moved on, and for the first time in years, we were free from ridiculous fines, free from constant surveillance, and most importantly, free to barbecue in peace. But Karen wasn't done yet. Because even though she had lost everything, she still had one last desperate move left to play. And what she did next, no one saw coming. The return of Karen from the shadows. For weeks, life in the neighborhood had been blissful. The HOA had been dismantled. Homeowners were redoing their houses however they wanted. The community had never been stronger. But then strange things started happening. It started small, petty, almost pathetic acts of revenge. Lisa's tires got slashed. Jim's mailbox was ripped out of the ground. Multiple houses had their sprinklers turned on overnight, wasting water and soaking lawns until they flooded. And oddly enough, HOA violation notices started appearing in people's mailboxes again. Except, of course, the HOA no longer existed. At first, we thought it was some leftover Karen sympathizers trying to keep her legacy alive. But then someone caught her on camera. It was Jim's new doorbell camera, the one he had just installed after the mailbox incident. And there, clear as day, was Karen, dressed in black, sneaking through the neighborhood like some kind of geriatric supervillain, leaving fake violation notices, slashing tires, messing with people's property. She was back, but not as a homeowner. She was now a saboteur, the stalker face. The moment we realized Karen was behind a mystery harassment, we alerted the police. But here's the problem. Karen wasn't technically breaking any major laws, at least not enough to get arrested outright. Sure, she was trespassing, but she wasn't breaking into houses or stealing anything. So all the police could do was issue a warning, tell her to stay away from the neighborhood, and send her on her way. But Karen wasn't afraid of warnings. And in fact, the very next day, things got worse. Lisa woke up to Karen standing outside her window at 3 a.m., just staring at her house. Jim's garage door was vandalized. The words, "Oh, forever," spray painted across it in giant red letters. My backyard, ransacked. My barbecue pit was overturned, my grill was gone, and my patio furniture was soaked in gasoline, as if she had planned to set it on fire but chickened out at the last second. The final straw. She started following me. At first, it was just glimpses, a car that looked suspiciously like hers parked near my office, or a shadowy figure standing down the street when I came home. Then it became obvious. She was stalking me. I'd see her in parking lots and grocery stores, even once at the gym, pretending to be on a treadmill while staring directly at me. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was obsessed. The final confrontation. I knew I had two choices. Let her keep escalating until she finally snapped and did something truly dangerous. And it for good. So I set a trap. Jim, Lisa, and I knew she would strike again, so we installed hidden security cameras all over my property, especially in the backyard, where she had already caused damage. And sure enough, that very night she came back. This time, she was dressed in all black, wearing gloves and carrying something. We watched in horror as she walked straight into my backyard, pulled a can of spray paint from her bag, and began vandalizing my new patio furniture. And then, she pulled out a knife and slashed my grill cover to pieces. That was it. I stepped outside, my phone already dialing 911, and said loud and clear, "Karen, it's over." She froze. Her wild eyes snapped to mine, and for the first time in her miserable existence, I saw something I never thought I'd see in Karen. Fear. Not anger. Not self-righteousness. Not even that smug arrogance she always carried herself with. Just pure, cold fear. She tried to run, but Jim and Lisa were already blocking the side gate, and by the time she reached the front yard, the police were pulling up. And this time, she wasn't getting off easy. Karen goes to jail. Karen's final act of insanity was the last nail in her coffin. This time, she was charged with multiple offenses: trespassing, vandalism, stalking, destruction of property, and attempted arson from the gasoline incident. And because of her previous record, she was facing real jail time. At the trial, she tried to plead insanity, claiming that she had been pushed to the edge by the injustice of the HOA's downfall. But the judge wasn't buying it. After months of legal battles, the final verdict came in. Karen was sentenced to 18 months in jail, with additional probation and a lifetime ban from ever living in an HOA community again. The moment the judge read the sentence, I swear I saw a weight lift off the entire courtroom. She had terrorized the neighborhood for years, but now she was done, finished, gone. The aftermath. With Karen finally out of our lives, the neighborhood celebrated. Jim hosted a block party. Lisa organized a barbecue cook-off. And me? I put up one final sign in my yard, just for the fun of it. A gold-plated plaque, right by my barbecue pit, that read, "In memory of Karen's HOA rules, here lies the last trace of her tyranny." People loved it. And as the sun set on our first Karen-free summer, I finally did something I hadn't done in years. I grilled a burger. And I ate it in peace. Because, at last, the nightmare was over. The neighborhood was finally free. The tyrant was gone, locked away in a cold jail cell, her power over the HO reduced to nothing but bitter memories. For the first time in years, we could breathe easy. But there was still one final chapter left to write. Because even though Karen was rotting behind bars, she had left behind a trail of destruction, legal battles, financial messes, and a neighborhood that had been at war with itself for years. And now it was time to rebuild. And what happened next? Well, that's the part of the story that no one ever talks about. Cleaning up Karen's mess. The first few weeks after Karen's sentencing were surreal. The neighborhood had spent so long in chaos, constantly walking on eggshells, that it almost felt strange to wake up and not be greeted by some new drama, some fresh, a nightmare, some ridiculous fine. But that didn't mean things were perfect. Because Karen had left scars. The HOA, though dismantled, had left behind a financial disaster, misused funds, unpaid debts, and a list of ongoing lawsuits longer than a CVS receipt. Karen had spent years funneling money into bogus projects, and now the financial records were a disaster. One homeowner, an accountant named Mike, took it upon himself to go through the books, and what he found was even worse than we thought. She wasn't just stealing from HOA funds, he told me over coffee one morning. She was using the HOA to take out loans against the neighborhood itself. I blinked. What does that even mean? He sighed. It means we're on the hook for some of this debt. A lot of it, actually. She used HOA funds as collateral, and now that the HOA is gone, the lenders are coming after the homeowners. I felt my stomach drop. Karen had tormented us for years, and now she was screwing us over from behind bars. The great neighborhood revival. We had two choices: fight back and try to dispute every loan and fine she had created, take matters into our own hands and fix the damage ourselves. We chose both. The first step was hiring a real lawyer, one who wasn't on Karen's payroll, to start disputing the fraudulent debts. The second step, we took control of our own neighborhood. The beauty of Karen's downfall was that the HOA had been dissolved, and that meant we could run things our own way now. So instead of rebuilding a new HOA, we did something radical. We created the first ever Freedom Council. No more random fines. No more dictatorships. No more power-hungry Karens. Instead, a community-run group made up of volunteers who handled basic upkeep and decision-making, where every homeowner had an equal say. And guess what? It worked. Within 6 months, the neighborhood had repaired every piece of damage Karen had caused with the help of local volunteers and donations, won multiple court cases, getting several fraudulent loans dismissed, hosted the biggest, most legendary barbecue festival in town history with a giant banner that read, "HOA Karen." And the best part, the neighborhood came together like never before. For years, Karen had kept us divided, making us feel like we were alone in our frustrations. But now, we were stronger than ever. A final message from Karen. It was almost a year later when I got the letter. A small, crumpled envelope, hand-addressed, with no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Karen. At first, I almost tore it up without reading it. But then, curiosity got the better of me. So I opened it. And inside, a single, scribbled note. "You think you've won. You haven't seen the last of me." I laughed, because she was wrong. She had lost. And this neighborhood, we would never let someone like her rise to power again. So I did what felt right. I threw the letter straight into the barbecue pit. And as it burned to ashes, I smiled. Because for the first time in years, Karen was finally, truly gone. And this time, she was never coming back.